John O'Leary to Thriving Launch.
All right, welcome to Thriving Launch. We're here with John O'Leary, who has an amazing story. John, welcome to Thriving Launch. Are you ready to launch?
I am thriving and ready to launch and grateful to be on.
Awesome. So, John, you and I, and a lot of us, really, honestly, I feel like the human story is one about being born and coming into this world and realizing we're disconnected beings. So we all have this thing in common where we've all experienced some form of struggle, but you've experienced something really unique. Your whole body was burned. Tell us about, I know that now you're using this story as something to motivate and inspire others, but let's go back to when your whole body was burned and what happened and what's happened since then.
Yeah, perfect. So, Lewis, I'm convinced now that everybody has a story. It's just generally not the story we're telling the world. So we all have this remarkable sacred story, and I kept mine hidden for almost 2 decades. What I was hiding from, I guess, was at the age of 9, I was involved I held a piece of paper that was on fire too close to a can of gasoline. It created a massive explosion that split the can in two, picked me up. It launched me 20 feet against the far side of the garage, literally set my world on fire, changed the trajectory of my very being. It left me with burns on 100% of my body and absolutely no chance of surviving. So that's the very beginning of this journey. It started when I was 9 and it continues on to this day.
So then what happened to you? One of the things that we know about you is that you didn't really tell people about it, but how do you hide something like that from the public? How do you hide it at school? How do you hide it from your friends? To me, that's something that would be really visible and everyone would know about.
Yeah, so, I realize not everybody's staring at a picture of me right now. I burned on 100% of my body. 87% of that is third degree, which means I have scars that cover almost 90% of my body. I've had my fingers amputated on both hands. My face miraculously is not burned at all, so I'm very fortunate in that regard. To hide something like this, and the reality is you only can hide it from yourself. I think the best secrets we primarily keep, we're the last ones to learn that everybody else knows about it. So of course my community knew, and of course my family knew. I'd been in the hospital for 5 months, recovered for a couple of years afterwards in surgeries and therapy. But I wore long sleeves. I tried to mask up. In grade school, it meant I tried to tell the best jokes and be the class clown. In high school and college, I probably drank a little bit more than I should have and got in a little bit more trouble than I should have, because I was trying to pretend like I was totally ordinary. The goal of my life, if you can imagine, when you're burned so badly, is just to be normal. That's just to be normal, to fit in. And so that's what I strive for. And the turning point in my life happened when I was 27. My mom and dad wrote a book about what happened to their son. His name was John O'Leary, your guest today, at the age of 9. They wrote this unauthorized biography of my life. It's called Overwhelming Odds, Chain World. It allowed me to realize what I went through, but I wasn't the only one that went through it. My family went through this. And it also allowed me to see that these scars, although thick and red and painful to some extent even today, were the beginning of the best of my story. It led to faith and character. It led to passion for life and grit, connections. It led to where I went to college eventually, which led to a chance encounter with a brunette named Elizabeth Grace, who has now blessed me with 4 little kids. It led to a fledgling business back in the day, and now a large speaking business today. So the best of my life is the result, actually, of being burned as a child.
This is what I find so amazing about being a human being. It's like whenever we have the biggest challenge in our lives, those challenges, they present the biggest gifts. They really shape us into who we are. And that's what I love so much about what you're sharing. Now, let's fast forward to where you are today. This is your past. It's shaped who you are. How has your past shaped some of your success practices of today?
Yeah, I think you can't separate yourself from your past. I live in the Midwest. I live in St. Louis, Missouri. We had a huge storm that blew through earlier this year, and we lost this huge oak. And the kids, I have 4 kids, we were able to go outside afterwards and look at the rings. And I'm no arborist, I'm no tree expert, but you're able to tell the health of each year by the rings, by how thick they are, how narrow they are, how dark they are, how light they are. And I think to an extent, as human beings, we have rings. And so the rings of being burned as a 9-year-old have certainly shaped the man that I am today, and the success practices, Kamala, to your point. When I wake up every morning, my body's achy. I'm a little bit sore. And I find if I'm not very intentional, there are questions that I'll ask myself throughout the day. I refer to these as the victim's questions. And the first question I'll ask is, why me? Right? Why this pain? Why that experience as a child? Why the scars today? Why the challenges in front of me? Why me? The second question is, who cares? The great question of indifference. Who cares? And the third question I'll ask, if I'm not super intentional and thoughtful, is, well, gosh, what more can I do? I'm just one. These things have happened. I can't really control what happens next. Instead of that, my experiences from the past, and I'm the great recipient of love from my family, from the doctors, the nurses, and many, many others who served me as a child and beyond. But what they taught me is I can ask 3 completely different questions. And so now every morning when I wake up, I ask the question, number 1, ready for it? Why me? Why am I so lucky? Why am I so blessed? Why do I have breath still and the opportunity to make a difference today, that I can maybe even do better today than I did yesterday? Why me? The second question is, who cares? If there are some scars, if there are some challenges, if there's a little bit of pain, if you have traffic on the interstate on the way into the office, if TSA is strip searching you again, who cares, man? We do work that matters. We're fortunate to live during this time period. So who cares if there are some uphill battles? And the third question is, well, gosh, what more can I do to ensure, don't hope for it, but work toward it, to ensure tomorrow is even better than today? And if you're listening closely at home or driving to work right now, you probably identified they're the same 3 questions, and yet at a different tone, through a different lens. It transforms the way you ask them, how you feel about them, what you do about them, and then the results you get after them.
You know, I absolutely love that, because it's such an important piece to living a life of success, is how we perceive the world, that lens in which we choose to look at our problems, our struggles, our successes through. And you're really choosing to look through the best lens that you possibly can.
I think it's the only lens with which we ought to view life. I don't view myself as a Pollyanna or a guy who just loves squeezing lemons and then drinking down that sugary goodness afterwards. We can either be victims, victors to life. There is no gray area here. No new president will bring it into our lives. No house will bring it into our life. No new car, no new success profession. That won't change who we are within. The only thing that can change is our determination on the front side of each day to be a little bit better, a little bit more fresh, a little bit newer, a little bit more engaged today than we were yesterday. And that is one of the great gifts that we have each day, regardless of our external circumstances.
You know, John, I know that you share your story a lot publicly nowadays. What inspired you to shift that and make your story more public, and how has that impacted people?
So it's an awesome question. It's one that after being burned, or through grade school, high school, or college, or even beyond. I was a real estate developer here in St. Louis, starting a young family, having a blast, living a good life. My mom and dad wrote the unauthorized biography of my life, changed my world, and about a week later, I got a call from a group of Girl Scouts. I believe it was 4 third-grade Girl Scouts, and they said, "Mr. O'Leary, will you story for our group?" And in life, and I think this is a lesson we all can learn in our businesses and relationships and faith journey, my answer to almost any question is yes. Yeah, I'm open to it. Even if I don't consider a speaker, even if I don't think the story is worthy of even sharing with a couple kids. But I said yes, shared the story, read my notes, wasn't even able to look up one time at those little monsters. Man, I was terrified being in that room, was not even paid a box of Samoas. I got no payment, nothing. This is not a scalable business back then. And yet afterwards, the little Girl Scouts came up. They gave Mr. O'Leary these big hugs, and it really touched my heart. And about a month later, one of their parents was a Rotarian. And he said, "John, will you share in our Rotary group?" And I said, yes. And then a member, and then a small business owner. The first year, we spoke 3 times. The second year, 8. In the 8 years since, we've had the opportunity of sharing this message more than 1,600 times, all 50 states, I think 15 different countries, hundreds of thousands of people impacted, tens of thousands of books sold, sharing message that just a decade earlier I wasn't even able to share in the reflection in the mirror. I think the first person that you got to be able to share your story with reflection is that stares back at you each day that's going to ask the question, hey, what are we going to do today? And that's an important dialogue to have every morning.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Before we close out today, what's the core message? What is the core practice that you want to leave the Thriving Launchers with?
Yeah. So when I was burned, what really happened was I was deciding to see what might happen if I held a flame to a can of gasoline. I'd seen other little boys in the neighborhood doing something similar, and I thought it would just create a pop. Well, what happened, of course, was before the liquid came out, the fumes grabbed it, created a mighty explosion, transformed my life. But my mom and dad and the doctors and the staff and the EMTs and the fire and my family and me always referred to what happened to me as an accident, right? John's accident, except it's not an accident. It's a choice. A little boy had no idea what the consequence might be, but I think when we go through life referring to everything that happens to us as an accident, we cheapen the life we live and the one we can live going forward. And so I think at the core of this message, Kamala, is this decision to wake people up from accidental living. No more excuses, no more blame shifting, no more excuse making. This is your life with one of them. Quit pointing the finger outward. Wake up to the beauty, the miracle of this moment. It's yours. What are you going to do with it?
We've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. John, it's been so fantastic to have you here sharing your story, your message, and such incredible takeaways for all of us Thriving Launchers. What an inspiration.
Well, it's been my pleasure being on your show, and I think what you teach is what we live in a marketplace that loves to talk about everything that's wrong. And then you and Lewis talk about all that's right and what we can do in our own lives and our own businesses to truly thrive going forward. And I just encourage you to keep sharing that message. Know that you're making a difference.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure to head over to thrivinglaunch.com. We'll see you there. Be sure to check out tomorrow's episode with